Very good morning and welcome to this episode of the Aligned Founder Podcast featuring our good friend Renee. How you doing?
Quite good.
Yeah?
Yeah,
Just a bit of a cold the last few days.
Yeah, just came back from Thailand. Was a little bit of a jet lag. Was a little bit of air condition, and yeah, this my body is not used to this anymore in the cold winter of Berlin.
For sure. Today we are going to explore a topic it's a multi-layered topic, which is something that I think both of us in our journey of like learning about these different tools and techniques and bringing them to the world here in Berlin, we've received the same questions many times. Mm-hmm. And the theme of the topic of today is, how is breathwork different from taking psychedelics or doing therapy? So this is a multi-layered, multifaceted topic. And I suppose the goal of today's podcast is to go deeper into each of these things and to tell some of our stories, speak to some of our experiences, and hopefully in that to give you a good picture of overall, like, what are these different practices, what are the pros and cons, and which would probably be serving you the most at which point of your kind of life journey you're at. So before we dive in, there's one thing I want to just kind of say as a precursor to this, and that is that whether you're talking about doing therapy, there's many forms of coaching or therapy available, whether you're talking about doing a plant medicine or psychedelic, or you're thinking about doing connected breathwork or any form of breathwork, as well as, meditation and any of these other mindfulness practices. These are all basically just tools, okay? So instead of thinking which one is better, we want to remove ourselves from just operating like which one's the best and more look at what's the outcome we're trying to achieve. So for me, the outcome of any of these tools in the personal development world is, how can I come back to a more whole and complete version of myself? How can I feel better and enjoy my life more? Have more fulfilling relationships, enjoy what I do, and like spend every day just enjoying what I do. And for me, the two things that are needed for that are like super important to define which of these tools is the most appropriate for you is, firstly, does this tool give me access to some kind of altered or different state of mind where I can access new insights? And the second thing we want to look at with each of these tools we're going to talk about today is, how easy is it to integrate those insights into our lives so that we can not just mentally understand it, but we actually are then living the insights that we've received in, from this tool or from this technique. Do you want to add anything else to that? Is there...
Great start summary.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. We're off to a flying start. Well, I want you and I actually to tell me, because we're going to start talking about psychedelics first. Okay. And this is a topic that has become more and more popular, I think, in today's world as things become more legalized around the world, in the US, Portugal as well. Mm-hmm. Before, what used to be, I remember my mum when I was growing up telling me, stay away from drugs. Drugs are bad, okay, And now it's more seen in at least entrepreneur circles and more, people who are trying different techniques. These are tools that we can use to achieve new insights, clarity, and a lot of people, have really great anecdotal stories and experiences of, taking psychedelics. And there is, of course, a lot of benefits, and there's also some potential downsides if they're done in the wrong way or with the wrong scenario. And I think the best way to do is just to talk about our experience, and then from that, maybe we can come up with the pros and cons.
Yeah.
So tell me about your time in Peru.
Yeah, so I just want to tell a few stories. I think that's most relatable. And even though every human's journey is going to be different, be that with breathwork, psychedelics, therapy, everybody has their own challenges, but still I think this is relatable. And it's always about, to me, comparing where have I personally been 10 years ago and where am I today? Mm-hmm. And that, again, will be different for everybody. But it's about the progress that you can make with these tools. And for me, like, it has been unbelievable progress. Mm-hmm. And also a result or a proof that all of these tools work is actually me sitting here right now talking about these things. Because in the past, I would have been afraid, people hear me talk about drugs or what will they think? And this is like one big thing that has changed for me, to just, hey, talk about my experience no matter what other people think, because I know this is my journey and there's positives that can come from it for other people. And if some people don't like it, that's okay. And it didn't used to be okay for me. Everybody has to like me. Nobody must think anything bad about me.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
There's a really interesting point that's beneath that, which is there might be someone listening to this at home and they might be thinking, wow, that's great for these guys. They can sit and talk about these topics or go out in the world and build a social media or do a business or whatever. I could never do that, you know, or maybe I'd be comfortable to do it in a business context because I, you know, for some reason I don't have resistance there, but you know, getting up on stage and giving a speech about some vulnerable moments in my life, that would be very edgy, you know? So like there's an example I use is what is really freedom, you know? And freedom for me is, you know, scenario one, being able to get up in front of 20 CEOs and give a presentation and feel confident. Second one is speak in front of 1,000 people and tell a very challenging, vulnerable story from your life. And the third one is to sing in front of 10 of the closest people in your life. And for me, freedom is, you know, being able to do each of them and many more and to feel totally okay with myself in that process and afterwards, you know? And I think that's a really nice barometer of how we can judge how far along the path we are. Because you might be really comfortable in the boardroom, but if you don't feel comfortable in being vulnerable, even in front of one person, then how free really are you to be yourself?
Yeah.
You know? So I think as you mentioned there, like this idea of like standing in and doing this probably wasn't even on the menu, I'd imagine, a few years ago.
No.
You wouldn't even think of like, oh, let me talk about something like this in the podcast.
Not at all. And even when I went to Peru doing ayahuasca in the Amazon rainforest, I wasn't even aware of my fears. I wasn't even aware about why I was doing anything. My goal with going there was, I was at a point in my life where I was stuck, and I was hoping, okay, I'm going there and this is going to give me new insights and give me answers on how to move forward. Yeah. But I didn't even think that I have, I don't know, challenges inside of me, fears. That was because this was always masked by outside validation, the way I structured my life. I didn't even have to look at that, or I wasn't aware because I was subconsciously doing things in my life that was masking all of my challenges and just having fun.
What kind of things were you doing?
Sorry?
What kind of things were they?
That I was masking?
Yeah.
Yeah, just a deep sense of not being good enough, of being judged by others, of always having to be perfect in order to be liked, being actually really afraid of being alone, not loved. I think these are quite common traits, what I know now amongst people. But I wasn't even, that wasn't in my field of awareness.
Yeah, there was actions happening, behaviors happening, but there wasn't an awareness of why they were happening.
Yeah, I was just living my life, basically. And I think this is for many people just living their lives and they just accept things for what they are, which in general is great if you accept yourself, but also not knowing that things could actually be much better, that life could be much more nuanced, that I could navigate my relationships so much better if I don't get triggered by this and that, if I can communicate differently. But yeah, I was just not aware of that at all. And when an emotion came or a trigger came, I would just react to it. And this was obviously going to affect the people around me as well, my business, my health, my relationships, everything. And I just thought this was me, or this is me. Final answer, you know, that there's nothing I can do about it. So, and when I went there, it was really, besides the psychedelic experiences, was very, very much out of comfort zone for me, because I was going by myself into the Amazon rainforest, far away from phone reception. They would never find me. I was kind of thinking, if something happens here. And like so far out of my comfort zone, no internet for 1 week, just walking without shoes, living in a little hut in my shorts all week, basically. Very, very simple life amongst these indigenous people who look at the world, you know, in a way that I never looked at it. And yeah, to just be in this environment alone I was like, wow, you're really doing this. And it was scary as well. And I remember when the shaman, so everybody had a talk with the shaman. There was 12 people from all over the world who booked this retreat. And everybody had like half an hour with this elder, wise man that only spoke Spanish with a translator. So why are you here? why did you come? And I was like kind of in a good mood. I was thinking, oh, these are the people, they have real problems. They have childhood trauma. And I'm just this guy who has a good life, who wants some answers on what to do next. And I was just saying, yeah, I just want to know what to do next. I'm fine, like no problem. And then after, when the ceremony started, the guy said, you sit here right next to the facilitator. I said, can't I choose my place? He's like, no, you will be here right next to the facilitator. So I was already thinking, hey, I'm the one with the least issues here.
I'm fine. I'm good.
Yeah, I'm fine. But he told me later, based on what I said, completely no awareness of what's underneath. He knew I was going to be in for a wild ride.
Wow.
And it was really humbling me. Yeah.
When was this? This was 2017?
No, 2018, February, actually. I was just going through my email that I sent to myself the same week when I wrote down all my experiences. Yeah, 2018. So.
That's 6 years ago now.
Yeah, 6 years ago.
Crazy. So I know you remember saying that you'd researched a lot before that. You'd really done a lot of like watching every single YouTube testimonial you could to really prepare because of the fear.
I was obsessed. I'm not a very thorough person with work. I have a great idea and then I leave it again and hopefully somebody else completes it. That was just my pattern. But with this, I was every day for hours. I was watching videos, reading, just because I was so afraid of, I never used any drugs before, even though I wouldn't call that drug anymore. In this culture, when you listen to these people and see how they live, it's medicine for them, and there's really no way I feel like I have the right to call it otherwise, because they live in so much harmony with themselves and with nature, and it was a really cool experience. But for me, it was super scary, losing control, doing something that is not in my control and potentially dangerous, is what some people say. So I just did so much research, and then I was already thinking, okay, I have a travel agency background, and I'm sure other people would like to do this, and they also have fears. So what if I create this website after I have done this, and I will help people answer all the questions, bring them there, and be a part of this, can make it a travel agency thing.
Always the entrepreneur,
Yeah. So after the first out of the 3 ceremonies in the morning, I was like, there's no way I will recommend anybody to do this. I will not take responsibility for them going to the jungle and experience what I just experienced, even though in hindsight it was very beneficial for me in my life, but it was also the most brutal and extreme experience ever, that really everybody needs to make their own decision if they want to do that with ayahuasca and going to the jungle in Peru.
Yeah, wow. So tell me, what exactly happened in those 3 ceremonies you did in that week? What did you see? What did you experience in your body?
It was, first of all, it was not comparable with anything that I've ever done before. I had a lot of parties with alcohol. I was really drunk. I thought, oh, I know what it's like to lose a little bit of control when you're drinking. And this was like just a whole different, not level, it was a whole different dimension. Yeah. I felt like in terms of control, I had as much control as if I was on a spaceship in the passenger seat, and I was just be shot up in different universes. And I was just watching, like there was no way I could have controlled it. So it was really quite extreme. I have had very weird sounding experiences, universal truths, like thinking about death, what it means, how we live our life in the world, our existence on the planet was I saw the world as such a very small thing, and that all the problems I'm worrying about every day are actually so unimportant. I started to laugh about all the stupid things I'm worrying about. Like, it was very big picture, very deep, just information that I was downloading about the universe. And I know that sounds weird and crazy if you haven't done this. And yeah, I was just shoved, I would say my deepest fears that I wasn't even aware of, they were taken out and shoved in my face with full force. And there was nothing I could do about it. And it was 100 times more scary than if a lion would run in here now trying to kill me. This is a fear that I can maybe identify, but this was so much worse. Infinite fear, which had some positives after, in hindsight.
Everything seems a bit easier after that, probably.
Yeah, and I could go now into details with what I saw in these all 3 ceremonies, but basically it was just really humbling. And opening completely new doors, new ways of looking at things, and just like, okay, there is a whole new spectrum of life there that I haven't even tapped into, and that made me curious to go really on this path of self-development.
Yeah. The way I like to think of psychedelics through my experience is less about like opening new doors and more about fucking smashing the door open. Like just like the big ball and chain swinging and like there's no more door. It's just a hole.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's quite brutal. And I think particularly for you having to, as you said, never had done any kind of personal development stuff before, never tried any other techniques, and just to go straight for the jugular was probably humbling.
I would have probably never done it if I knew what I was actually into.
Yeah.
I had not the capacity to understand the power of it, you know?
Yeah, sure.
It was...
So tell me about after, because, you know, I'd imagine that you received some, as you said, universal kind of truths and downloads. Like I had Katerina Klotz on the podcast yesterday. We were talking about travel. You know, she traveled very young, you know, so she got to experience lots of new cultures, which means that she's more open-minded being in her current place. So it sounds like you did some like intergalactic travel. So how did that then
like in hindsight, I didn't understand who I was and all my fears that I had.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't even aware of them, and then going from never thinking about them because I created a life where I was blocking them out and never had to confront them, to completely unfiltered get all of them shoved in my face at the same time was like, brutal again.
So tell me, what were the kind of, let's say, top 3 benefits that you received because of that experience, and then maybe the top 3 like challenges or things you'd like to have done differently?
So it was very interesting. Yesterday I was reading through this email again, where I made all of my notes. And I was reading it and I was like, wow, there was actually a lot of gold in there, like a lot of really good insights, but also understood most of them didn't stick with me back then. I wasn't ready. There was no help for me to integrate what I experienced. So the thing that stuck with me and the changes that I did experience was, first of all, the openness and the awareness of that there is more, and for me to have the motivation to follow that path of working on myself.
Yeah.
The other thing was this connection to nature and gratitude for everything that I have because of the extreme fear I felt. I was so grateful simply being okay. Yeah. And I was like, okay, I always want these great things and have these dreams, and I'm frustrated that I don't have them yet. But after this week, I was like, I'm alive. Thank you. You know, like, so it was very like humbling me down to, and also the health part. It was showing me in different ways some things that I need to take better care of myself and my body, because with the party company I had, there was just a lot of alcohol and unhealthy food, and just the lifestyle wasn't healthy. Also not looking after myself enough. And this was really telling me, like, you must look after yourself and give me exact examples. And really this shifted.
Yeah.
When I went back to Greece for a season, which is like 3 months of basically everyday things happening, and in the years before I was going out almost every night, this was the first summer where I actually kept a healthy diet throughout the summer. Really only went out 2 or 3 times a week instead of 6, and really trimmed it down. And this was 100% because of this experience. So this was a big step forward. What else? So things that I made a couple of notes here of things that I experienced and that didn't stick. So one thing I wrote down was I shouldn't limit myself. There's so many things I limit myself with, and I understood in this journey, wow, this is just my mind. Then I need to be able to let go of control. Always controlling everything is not serving me. Understood my fear of being alone and not being loved for the first time.
Yeah. Well.
The ego thing, that I was super controlled by my ego, and now there's a lot of talk about ego and we shouldn't have it. I think now I'm at a place where I can work with my ego, talk with it,
Sure.
not being controlled by it. But this was something I realized there, but it didn't stick either. And also the notion around outside satisfaction and that bad things are part of life. These are all things I had written down that actually now I'm talking about, but really that only sunk in the last year or two, also with the help of Breathwork, that I actually understood these things deeply and implemented them in my life and understood what impact they actually have on my behavior and on my relationships. And back then, I saw it, I wrote it down, but I have forgotten it again.
Yeah.
So
All right, straight back to the old pattern.
yeah. So yeah, there were definitely very helpful things. I'm glad I did it. But I think I would have gotten way more out of it if I did it a bit later on my journey, where I already understood myself, psychology a little better. Yeah. I was just left alone with all this new information, and yeah, it kind of disappeared again.
Yeah, totally. So to bring it back to look at that experience through the lens which we talked about earlier, mm-hmm. the two kind of fundamental principles of these tools. So the tool of psychedelics, in this case ayahuasca, access. How easy is it to access an altered state, and then how easily do we integrate those? So you could say, first of all, it sounds like the access to altered state was probably a little too good. You know, it was like, no, you're on the fucking roller coaster strapped in, and you don't have a choice, so you're getting shown all these really deep pieces. Yeah. So some could say that's a good thing. I like the idea of pendulating, so not just going straight from 0 to 100, but like mm-hmm. dipping the toe in the water, dipping 2 toes, and then moving slowly in, so that we're never really fully overwhelmed. Of course, there's going to be points when we need to lean in a little bit further, but I think just jumping straight in the deep end can be jarring for a lot of people. Yeah. And there's some people who, there's like a polarity, I think, in how people respond to this. Some people go to one and they think, oh, this is my savior now. And they go and they do, like I met one guy, he did 18 ceremonies in 6 months. Yeah. Because he's like, now I'm broken. He saw all this shit and he needs to just, like, he's addicted then. Yeah. The other alternative is that it just leaves people like completely almost re-traumatized. They don't know what to do. Like you said, you had these insights, but you didn't implement. Now, the even deeper layer is if it brings up trauma or fears, and then they're just kind of, they leave and they're like, okay, what the fuck? Like, what is life? And there's this like hangover thing that happens where people leave these experiences and they don't know what to do. Yeah. Even if there's some systems in place for, inverted commas, integration, it's only mental integration. It's not actually then changing the behavior and the deeper underlying processes, which is what's driving the behavior, the subconscious mind. So, that idea of like accessing altered state is important, but it's like doing it in a, as I said, like a pendulated way, so where we dip in and out and kind of move in and out. So the second part then is the integration part. And I think that's really important because it sounds like you said you've got the kind of list straight out of a personal development book there nearly of like how to live your life, you know? Yeah. And probably many people have that experience, whether it's their own psychedelic thing or even just like a coaching or reading a great book, New York bestseller, How to Change Your Life. And they read the things and go, yes, I understand that. Yes. And then life goes on and nothing happens. And I think a big downside or challenge of psychedelics is that it's very, first of all, insights can be very random. You know, I remember reading your email back then and you were saying there was demons over here and they were saying things and it's like, what does that fucking mean? You know, it's very hard to actually make sense of it by yourself, particularly because we don't know what we don't know. So I think even if you have a practitioner there with you or the shaman or whatever, you're still only able to kind of perceive or understand what your mind allows, you know? So even if there's someone there helping you and you're saying, oh, I see a demon, and then like it's very open to interpretation. There's not much like grounded science in that, you know, like this is what this means. It's all kind of guessing work, I suppose.
100%, yeah. And
so in favor or in argument of psychedelics in the path to becoming a more whole and true version of ourselves. I think a lot of people are so stuck in their mind and in their old patterns that they kind of need something to kind of open the door and just go, mate, what are you doing? You know, to really shake things up. Yeah. That might not be exactly accessible through meditation or even therapy or coaching. Yeah.
No, this is absolutely, some people maybe need a pattern interrupt. You know how some people always talk about changing their life but are stuck in unhelpful patterns and then they have a car accident and almost die. Yeah. And that's the trigger for them to actually then change something. And in the same way, I feel like psychedelics can be that trigger so you don't have to go through a car accident, but you actually do something that is a little bit extreme, but that shows you clearly that there is other ways, like in a way that it lands for you, that you see and believe I can actually do some positive changes. So this can be powerful. And also I want to add, I mean, psychedelics, same with breathwork, there's different techniques. Yeah. And you have ayahuasca, which is the end boss, basically. And then you have mushrooms, for example, where it very much depends on the dosage, you know? So there's also much lighter, softer ways of learning a little bit we also have some experience there, and I think, yeah, also beneficial. And it's very nuanced, and everybody's journey is unique. So me talking about my ayahuasca experience now might be completely different for somebody else.
Yeah.
But in essence, I think, for example, the difficulty to integrate is a common thing for everybody.
Yeah. So what's funny for me is like, I think so if we look at, let's say, psychedelics through that lens, we've got very good access to altered state, maybe too good. And the part B is the integration, quite difficult, hard to make sense of things. And often, unless there's like a system in place to really, on an embodied level, actually apply and change those behaviors, it's just going to go back to the way it was pretty much, maybe with some new insights. And it's also, there's quite a tax on the body as well. Like you're really putting a lot of toxins in the system. Yep. It's also illegal in many places. So you kind of have to go somewhere like Peru or, the Netherlands or Portugal. And in doing that, there's more chance to be exposed to like just looking up someone online and then, can I trust them? How do I know? You're watching a video on YouTube testimonial. Okay, can I trust this? So there's a lot of like leaning into fears, which again, isn't necessarily a bad thing if someone's only been in their box to kind of open up, but there's the opportunity to fall into some challenge there in something that's less regulated. You're going out on a limb.
And it's more like a peak experience, right? Like you don't fly to the jungle in Peru once a month to do this. It
takes a lot of planning.
It goes very deep. Like when I had this experience, I didn't want to go near psychedelics for, I don't know, a year or two.
Yeah.
And with like therapy, coaching, breathwork, this is something you can actually do as often as you like.
Yeah.
It's not going to impact you in any way negatively. So yeah, it's a super interesting topic, and I think it's very individual for everybody to make a decision when is the right moment for them to do it, or if they should do it. Great possible benefits, but also a few things to really
Yeah, I think if you're someone who has a lot, like if you're aware that you've got a lot of stuff kind of from childhood, or you've got a lot of stuff in the background, a lot of challenges, a lot of anxiety and these kind of things, I don't think diving straight in the deep end with that is probably your best approach. I think building up slowly to it, and then maybe at some point in the future, but not looking to this as your savior, as like, hey, I'm going to come and do this and it's going to cure all my problems. Like, I think that's often we call them seekers, someone who's really seeking the cure or the answer. And they're like, I'm in pain, please remove this pain, I'll do whatever it takes. And they're more likely to do something extreme like this, and it's actually going to set them further back. It's going to dysregulate them more and leave them more jarred. Even if they get some good insights, they're physically going to be more dysregulated after. So my experience actually of ayahuasca was funny. I had been doing actually connected breathwork for about a year and a half at that point, and I'd done other meditations and stuff for years before that, but I'd already spent a lot of time in altered state. And I'd been building up my capacity slowly to be with more and more. At the beginning, 5%, and then maybe 10%. And, really growing and feeling more and more comfortable in my body this is the key word here is surrender, okay? Yeah. That you need to be able to let go in these experiences, because you're on the roller coaster. Now, imagine being on a loop-to-loop roller coaster. You can grip on and scream as hard as you want, or you can let go and just enjoy, because you're in the ride anyway. So I think our ability to have already worked through some of those fears on a deeper level, so that we can just surrender, let go, and enjoy the process and actually get those insights makes a huge difference. So I actually quite enjoyed it. I did 2 ayahuasca journeys in a weekend. And the first night, I was quite nervous, because remember, you told me the story 2018. I was 2022. So I was like, wow, 2021, my bad. So, 3 years ago, I'd heard this horror story or whatever, and then so my first journey, I felt confident, but also there was this little part of me that was nervous. And I remember being in that first night and being like, okay, this is different, but it's familiar. Like, I know this, I was comfortable already in that state, because I'd spent dozens and dozens of hours in breathwork in this altered state already. So I felt I'd already flexed the muscle and trained the muscle of surrender and trusting and letting go, and allowing my body to take over, and allowing the ego mind to switch off. Yeah. And on that process, I could then just be curious. And I'm watching all these people around me violently throwing up and have screaming and stuff. And I'm just chilling, because I'm I'm good, And I think a big part of those experiences is, and I've heard this from other stories as well, also with Iboga as well, the people who resist it who don't want to look at things or don't want to feel things, that's when the vomiting comes. It's like a somatic, like the body purging what it needs to purge or forcing it on the body. Whereas if you can surrender to that, then there's just like an allowing that happens, and then it just kind of gets to flow, and it's a much more easeful experience. So that's been my experience. And then with psilocybin, I have to give a lot of credit to that from a place of I had one or two journeys where I had had a like pretty decent dose of mushrooms, and my guitar happened to be there, and then there was some emotions coming up. You know, for instance, with my ex-girlfriend on one journey, and she was experiencing some emotion. I was able to pick up the guitar and just play this song fully formed, and what that did for me was it kind of opened that door, as you said, where I could. It showed me a part of myself that had been hiding, that my ego mind had been pushing down. Said, you're not an artist, you're not a songwriter, you're just a performer. Do that because it's better, you're good at that, it's safe. And it showed me without doubt that I am a songwriter, you know, I'm an artist. So that was a really undeniable moment for me where I'm like, wow, I produced this when my ego mind was switched off. So that really opened a big door for me as well, but then I think that the integration again came later with the breathwork of like then actually processing and working through it on a weekly basis and changing my behaviors. Like, okay, now I'm an artist. What do I do? You know, now there's the new goal up on the hill, but how do I get there? So it was then the week on week. Okay, I want to write a song. I want to play my song in front of people. Oh, I feel fear. Okay, let's work through that in a breathwork session. And it was then taking the steps every week to move closer to that goal, which the psychedelic experience had given me the insight into, you know? So yeah, so I suppose the summary of that is like psychedelics, you know, approach with caution, maybe try a bit of dipping your toe into altered state in something a bit easier. Like the very basic first thing I did was like a Joe Dispenza meditation, or like something like a float tank where you're just switching off the prefrontal cortex, the cognitive mind. You can drop more into the body and more into interoception, internal awareness. The next level would be, as of course, connected breathwork, which is why that's what we do, because it's something that's way easier to integrate insights in. It's legal, it's safe, it's, well, when done with the right technique, the right practitioner. And it's something that, you know, you don't have to plan 6 months in advance to go to the jungle to do, you know?
Yeah. I just want to empathize to wrap that up with what you said about surrendering. And that was also what the shaman told me, and what I realized in hindsight is me not being able to let go because I was so afraid to look at my fears.
Yeah.
Again, I created a life where I had to not look at them at all.
Yeah.
And that's why I try to hold on so badly into keeping control about what is happening on this journey. But obviously, this ayahuasca is so much stronger than me in that moment. So it just kind of pushes you more and more. Let it go, let it go, let it go, and it gets more and more extreme. And when I talk to all the other people, those who were also not able to let go had the same problem.
Yeah.
And now we know from breathwork with many of our clients that letting go of control in general is a very big challenge for many people in life. They even say that when they come for the first session, I struggle with letting go of control. I created this very safe comfort zone in my life where I know if I do this, everything's going to be okay, basically. And then just to lay back and just let it happen in itself is a very big challenge for many people. But that's when the magic also happens. Yeah. That's when you allow things to come up.
And that's one thing that we are trained to see and to repattern in the breath as well. Because like typically if someone comes in and they say, I need control, in the breath pattern, it's going to be very probably shallow. There's not going to be a deep flowing breath. There's going to be a gripping, maybe in the hands, and there's just going to be like a tension in the body. Yeah. And so what we'll do is when they start to breathe more, they'll drop into this altered state. And then we can actually bring through body work. We can cue them to start to relax the breath, relax the body. And it's almost like in that moldable altered state, we can actually change the function of the body. We're not just throwing them in the deep end saying swim. We're showing them stroke by stroke how to swim. How to then repattern this. So I think that's something that's really valuable. So that if you then decide to, fly off to the Amazon in a year or two, that's then more available, and you're probably more likely to have a more easeful experience as a result, having already processed some of the deeper pieces and just learn to trust and surrender a bit more. So yeah, it's pretty cool stuff. So the other avenue that we want to look at is that of therapy or coaching. Okay, so psychotherapy, multiple forms of therapy, anything that involves sitting down with a trained professional and speaking or talking at length. I think it's incredibly important. First of all, I want to have a caveat that this is like something I wholeheartedly support. It's been very important for me. Like both my parents are bloody coaches, so I kind of grew up around it, you know. There's a quote from, I think is it Steve Chandler, who talks about, you know, if a man went and talked to a tree for an hour a day, that would be very valuable. And then if that was a person in front of him that just sat there and didn't say anything and listened, that would be even more valuable. And then if that person could ask questions and empathize with them, like how powerful is that, you know? So it's like this thing of like being able to externally process and just voice things and to be witnessed and seen in that and to be accepted in that, and someone to go, hey, that thing that you never shared with anyone, that's okay. And for one person to accept that means that all that shame that we've held inside of like, I'm bad, I'm wrong, I shouldn't have that thought, I shouldn't feel this way, for that to be released, just for one person to see that, that's the black swan that disproves the whole theory. Like, oh, one person accepted me, maybe I'm okay, you know? What's been your experience with that as a modality?
I think in the end of the day, human relationships and connection to other humans is probably the most important thing everybody needs. Yep. And I can really say that without some particular people in my life, I would probably still be the same old Rene. I definitely needed that support of people who show me the way and support me and maybe give me a little kick in the ass sometimes, and hold the mirror up and reflect. So sometimes I see people now and I really dislike their behavior, how they treat me, how they communicate with me or with others. And I really went from, you know, this could still be me as well if I didn't have support from, be that coaches, mentors. Because if we don't, we just stuck in the patterns we adapt from childhood, our conditioning, and we just don't know any better. And it shouldn't be an excuse for bad behavior, but at least it makes me understand people better who behave in a way that is certainly not helpful for them and for the people around them. I think, again, the human connection and somebody like a coach, like a mentor, is a very important part of the way of self-development. It's also somebody for me personally, who would call me out on my bullshit sometimes, because if it's like a girl or somebody you're together with and you're not aware of your things, and then there's a conflict, I used to get defensive, and I didn't want to hear it from her because that would mean I'm not the perfect boyfriend. But if there's
they're not neutral,
if there's a neutral person who doesn't care if you're good or bad, it's their job to hold up the mirror
and help you be better.
It's much easier to receive and hold me accountable to keep being on that path, especially for somebody who is naturally not very disciplined, how I was. I needed this guidance and just to keep me on track. Therapy is something I actually only very recently started, and just from a place of, hey, I'm actually already in a good place, but I want to understand myself even better. And it did, again, give me some new nuances, understanding some of my behaviors, which I then could integrate in the breathwork sessions. So finally, I think, like with you and me, having all of this experience over the last 10 years and working on ourselves and talking to so many people, this is basically why we came up with what we're doing now. Like really seeing all of the angles and then finding the product that really can fast track people the best way possible on having a more fulfilled life and being a better contributor to society as well. And because I think the mind-based thing, which is the coaching, the therapy, understanding, bringing awareness to who am I, what do I want, why do I behave this way, but then also hitting, what's the word in English? Hitting not a rock.
Plateau? Or?
Yeah, plateau with, okay, I've understood all these things now, and then something happens that triggers me, and my brain knows, oh, this shouldn't trigger me because it's nonsense, but it's still in my body, and it's still, I feel bad, or I have this knot in my stomach, and that's where breathwork came in and like helped to remove these, because it's just a very different thing. It's on a feeling level, and then this combination of coaching and therapy and breathwork, this is the real magic, in my opinion.
the perfect combo.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's an analogy I like to use, which is the mind is a child and the body is the parent. And so the child can say, I want to have an ice cream and go to the park and play football. But if the parent says no, if the parent has other plans, then the child is not having ice cream, you know? Now, the child can scream really, really loud for a long time, and maybe the parent gives in one day, like for this one day, but it's not a consistent strategy. So the same way, you know, I can say in my mind, I'm going to go on a diet, and then I get triggered and my body says, ooh, look, cake, you can suppress your emotions now. And my mind can say that's not a good idea, but the parent is going to go ahead and do whatever the fuck it wants. And so that the same can be applied. The mind can do all the affirmations and all the positive thinking and stuff, really, really trying very hard, and it might work for a day or two, but it's not a long-term strategy. You know, better to get the parent on board, and the child and the parent can work together, like in this relationship. So to think about like therapy from that lens, okay, or any kind of coaching mind-based approach, again, through our two factors, we've got the access to altered state and we've got the integration. So off the bat, we can say integration, therapy, coaching, awesome, amazing. You know, that's how the mind understands it, which is how we really embody that. Like, again, on a deeper level, it becomes part of our psyche, our ego. One challenge, I think, of only going down a mind-based talk therapy approach is that there's very little access to altered state. Now, there are some practices, like, for instance, NLP is one that a lot of people try. It's a buzzword. That can access kind of down into the body, but I like to describe it like you're trying to get into a house, but you're trying to go down the chimney. It's a very inefficient way to enter the house. And you have to have a very skilled Santa Claus to go down the chimney and access the house when you could just technically walk through the front door. Yeah. Now, the psychedelics are blowing the front door off, and that's not great either, okay? But ideally, we want to knock on the door and be granted access, which for me is what connected breathwork is. Yeah. That's where we have this access to the house in an easeful way. It's still consensual, and it's moving at a pace that feels good for the person. So that's where I think, you know, is one of the limitations or downsides of therapy. And there's a lot of people who can probably relate to that, where they understand everything in their mind. They've reached this limit of, like, they've done all the seminars, the books, they've walked on fire at the Tony Robbins event, and yet they still are going back to the same partner in a relationship. They're still, you know, taking the same shit and work, and they're not moving forward, and they're then in this shame spiral of like, why can't I be better? Yeah. And the key is embodiment. The key is not more talking about it. The key is actually understanding what are the triggers that are held in the system, the incomplete reflexes, the incomplete emotions, and old experiences that have been brought to the surface as in the moment, that are stopping your like frontal brain, your conscious mind from really choosing the best way, and you're going back to old behaviors because it's the body's protecting itself. So without that embodiment component, it's very difficult to really make significant and consistent progress forward. Yeah. I think by including the talking element, the coaching element with this altered state, that is the magic sauce. That's the 2-in-1.
For sure.
And particularly working with someone who knows how to work with both. Because you could go and do ayahuasca and then call your therapist, but it's going to be a bit of a mishmash, you know? Yeah. Whereas if someone is versed in how those two worlds interlap, like one thing I love to do is, we do this in the sessions where we'll open a topic, we'll go deeper in it, and we'll really, in the mind, unpack it for 30, 40 minutes. And then we'll already understand what's the deeper emotion or the deeper unmet need or which event in the past triggered that. And then we straight away go into that experience. Mm-hmm. And then we're already completing that experience. So it's not just, oh, I had a good coaching session, I now understand why I'm angry all the time. Yeah. And then I go back and just be angry again. It's like, oh, now I actually complete that, what's under the surface. So that's where we see this real progress moving forward.
Yeah. And I liked, kind of like the example of some of the breathwork teachers told themselves in Bali when they had challenging childhood, for example, and then they would go to therapy for many, many years. And it was hugely beneficial for them. It was a very important support that they needed in their lives. But they said it was somewhat like a painkiller. Yeah. Like it would help in the moment. It would help to feel better, but it wouldn't make it go away eventually. Like if there was a new trigger, the same pain would come back again in the body, and there's nothing you can do. And that's when they said, when we started to do the embodiment or add breathwork with the embodied experiences to it, that's when finally, okay, it was in my awareness, but I could also let it go. And actually life was changing after that, like really changing.
Yeah. A big part of, I think, for me, putting together this program, like the different stuff we're doing, whether it's the ongoing program is the Aligned Founder program, which is then basically the way we're doing it is we're doing a coaching session with people in their morning. And then ideally the same day or within 24 hours, we're doing a breathwork session where we can unpack things in the mind and then afterwards feel them in the body and process and already release them. The reason why I think that's like, I'm really passionate about that is because a lot of the time I was kind of doing that for myself. Like I was in Bali, I was doing all these different techniques, reading this book, going to that seminar, that workshop, and life was presenting me triggers, but it was still on me to be self-led. I was still figuring it out pretty much by myself. I'm like, oh, I now have this memory of when I was 12, and now I'm going to take that to this breath work and try to process that, and now integrate it with, so it was really me putting it together by myself. So what I really wanted to do is what I would have loved back then was someone who was kind of in my corner of the ring and kind of like understood both worlds and could kind of find the nuance and the dance between the two. So it was like actually much more efficient moving forward. What probably took me, a year and a half to get to probably could have taken 6 to 8 months had I been more intentional with how I went about it.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's super fun the way we're doing it now. Like when you do the coaching session in the morning, then we have a little call, what came up, you tell me, then the people come to me, do the breathwork session. I prepare a very particular playlist, like every
Based
song.
on what came up.
Yeah, every song, the lyrics of the song, the feel of the song is like really individual for this person based on where they are in the journey, what topics they want to work on. And the affirmations even, like when people are in the altered state, to say maybe 1, 2, or just 3 words in the right moment can, boom, open a door and create, tears or anger or whatever that needs to come out. And it's really, a very individually crafted thing that we do now. And it's great to see how it's received.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So just to wrap it up, if you're someone who has kind of had their interest piqued by this, if you're curious and you want to know more, we do have this ongoing program that we work with people over a period of time. We also do retreats, which is like kind of like our more safe and integratable version of Renee going to Peru, where you can come for 5 to 7 days in a new location, which opens the mind and be with other like-minded people, and to kind of have, again, the best of that experience without maybe the demons coming at you kind of thing. Keep it as PG as we can.
And what I want to add there with my travel agency background, I think the retreats that we have created, and we saw the results of those we already did, it's just so much fun, first of all, for me, being a part of that, seeing the things people go through and hearing them saying how life-changing it was for them. So I think the content of the retreat itself is amazing, but then also having now the possibility to add this travel experience and choose locations for the retreats that are not usual and really go to unique, exotic places that have a special atmosphere to it, where in itself as a travel experience, people are already like, wow, I've never done this before. And then being that isolated, for example, next big one in the mountains of Georgia, 5,000 meter high peaks, like medieval little village in the mountains, and having this beautiful chalet. And I think, just being there, breathing this air there and saying, okay, I'm somewhere I've never been before. None of my friends have been here before. And I invest in myself and I'm taking this trip outside of my everyday life to really go deep. It just adds so much to the experience, and I just can't wait for those. Already looking into new destinations. I have a few good ideas.
Exciting. We've got Greece and Ibiza later in the year as well.
Yeah.
So I'm excited for all of them. If you've enjoyed this episode, we're going to have more coming on this topic soon. We're going to record another episode after on people pleasing, which is fun as well. So hope you enjoyed. If you've got any more questions, reach out to us. You can get us at pete@realllyalign.com email, or Renee@realllyalign. You can go to our website, realllyalign.com. It's going to have all the details of these different programs there as well. And look forward to sharing more on this topic very soon.